All right, now something completely different. So thanks to the organizers for the opportunity to present, and I assume this is the device. Okay. So I'm going to talk about the Materials Genome Initiative, which has been around for 10 years as a US initiative. I'm kind of curious with this audience of people who are very interested in materials, obviously, just who is familiar with the initiative? Okay, not bad. That's good. That's good news for me. It means we're doing our job. So I will try to balance this. Obviously, I can't cover in sufficient detail everything I want to cover, but there's some amazing connections that I want to make with just the last talk. And I showed up late because I was at another conference, and I'm going to make up for that by leaving soon. So I apologize. All of my slides are available, and you can just send me an email and I'll send it to you. And also, if you want to reach out to me, go ahead, and I'd be happy to talk further. So again, I apologize for leaving quickly. Okay, so let's see if I can get this slides. Good. Okay, so I would start with a joke. It's good, paying attention. Right, so I'm from NIST, it's a units joke. All right, so I'm going to talk about the last 10 years of the MGI. And my own organization, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, supporting it. And then talk about the connection between that and artificial intelligence, and then try to tell you what's been keeping me awake nights in this sort of set of challenges. And I'm going to watch the clock very quickly because I'm going to ram a lot of slides down your throat here. But as I said, don't worry about it. You can always get them. Okay, so, and if the organizers could let me know when I'm down to 5 minutes, I'd appreciate it. Okay. So the M, right? So I'm going to be talking about materials. Obviously, I'll try to at least pay lip service to class. We'll go a little further than that, hopefully. But you know, it's just an example in the way that we think about it, but a very important example. So that's what we're talking about here. And so here I have some pictures of steel. And what's the really important point here? These are identical composition steels, right? What matters simply is how they were annealed. In this particular case, I don't know exactly what the curves were, but you can see the microstructures of these two systems are completely different. And really what the MGI, in some sense, is about is that we now have the ability to predict this kind of thing. That's what really has come along in the last 20 years. And because of that, we're suddenly in a position to design materials in ways that we really weren't able to before because we have predictive power. And so I did go and find, oops, the picture of the glass is gone. That's really bumming me out. It's transparent glass. Okay. Anyway, so the point was that, thank you for that. The point here is, of course, that we're now designing glasses using MGI techniques. And so this was just a paper that a colleague of mine happened to have written on this very topic about metallic glass, in this case, as opposed to, but you know, it's okay. Oh, there it is. Exactly. I can't even remember my own slides anymore. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about now is just sort of how we got here, right? And so in my mind, if you look on the left, you're looking at a CAD software tool to help design some part. And then if you look in the upper right there, you're looking at what's a finite element model, so you're trying to predict the stresses that are occurring in a system. And we have software tools for that, and pretty much a reasonably sophisticated engineer can use that with relative ease. They can teach at an undergraduate level. And then in the lower corner is some work I did with some Hungarian colleagues of modeling microstructures using what's called a phase field method. And we're trying to push all of these methods now, out to make them more usable to more people. So we're trying to get this kind of thing done and lower the barriers to the use of these tools. So you might ask, well, what is the G in MGI, right? So this was genome, and we like to joke that there are two groups of people that don't like the name Materials Genome Initiative, and those are materials researchers and biologists. But it's because it's a metaphor, right? And scientists don't really like metaphors, right? They like precision, and this is, it's a little disappointing. But hopefully the funders sort of got what we meant, and that's why we have an initiative. And of course, the I, which is the next slide, hopefully, is the real key point here. It's an initiative. Well, what does that mean? Right? That's just a statement by the executive. In this case, it was started in the Obama administration, that there's something that needs to get done that's bigger than the mission of any particular agency. Right? And so we need to work together in some sense as agencies to try to make it happen. In this case, the primary contributors, Department of Energy, National Science Foundation, NIST, Department of Defense, NASA to a certain degree, and some of the other agencies also have input. And we're now at 3 administrations, right? And this is coordinated by the National Science and Technology Council, which runs out of the OSTP, Office of Science and Technology Policy. We issued a white paper 10 years ago, and the basic idea here was that we wanted to accelerate the discovery, design, deployment of new materials twice as fast at a fraction of the cost. And how we were going to do this is we were going to build a materials innovation infrastructure. If you look at the infrastructure, it's in some sense trivial, right? You've got computational tools, experimental tools, and the data. Nobody would tell you that that's anything other than the ingredients of science and engineering. The real idea here is that you're going to integrate them as tightly as possible and get that acceleration through the merging of computation experiments. So not, I do my experiment, give it to the theorists, they look at it, no. Right? We're going to try to work together and iterate as quickly and as tightly as possible using these predictive tools. And I'd be remiss if I didn't really mention the next generation workforce element of this. A lot of these tools are broadly available. If you want to say, well, how does the US benefit from this infrastructure? The answer has to be we have the people who can use it. So we need to somehow get that, either through training, immigration, whatever the answer is, we need to recruit the talent. We've recently released a new strategic plan. If I have time, I'll briefly go through that. This is our newest diagram. Originally, we sort of visualized the discovery of new materials all the way out to deployment, in sort of like a technology readiness level picture. But you can also think of it more as a sort of friendship bracelet. This is a very iterative process, an integrative process. And so we've been thinking about that. Okay, so here's my very crude mock-up from a decade ago when we started to think about the NGI. And on the bottom here, let's see if this laser works. We have what I would call the standard material science multi-scale modeling paradigm, right? We start at the quantum level, and you're going to model there, and you're going to work your way all the way up to making a car, right? And this is a quantum physicist's naive view of what's going to happen. Right? So the reality is there's an awful lot of inputs that you have to put into this loop to make it work at all, to have any engineering outcome. You have to make choices around what data you're going to feed into it. You have to pick models. And there are approximations in those models, all sorts of terrible ones often. But you have to do it if you want to get out to these length scales. And then you also have to move the information along this. So what you're really doing is you're creating an infrastructure for capturing knowledge around materials. Okay. So these are not new ideas, and I think I've made that clear. What MGI is actually about is lowering these barriers to access to these capacities, right? So that more people can do it and small businesses can do it. So for example, here's a picture of what Apple was doing back in 2014 with the first Apple Watch, where they used these techniques and co-designed the alloys in these watches at the same time that they were designing the watch itself. And it's now in all of your devices, some of these alloys, and newer ones as well. And of course, there's the glass on top there, right, which Corning is going for so many of these. Let's see, what's the next one? Which way do I have to point this thing? There we go. And then SpaceX has been very, very successful of late, using the same kinds of techniques. They're now down to an 18-month for designing the alloy that goes into a new rocket engine to deployment. I mean, that's unprecedented. Okay, it used to be 18 years or more. So it's extraordinary what you can do with these approaches. So it's not a new set of ideas. We also commissioned an economic study to say, well, what would the impact be if we actually adopted these techniques industry-wide? And the answer is hundreds of billions of dollars in return. Now, as a modeler, I know that this is a crude model, okay, but nonetheless, large error bars, but we're talking hundreds of billions of dollars in economic impact. So how do we get there? So NIST started to think about this, and what we did is, so there's my diagram again, and we said, well, what can we do? How do we support it? And what we decided was to focus on 3 main ideas. We want to focus on data quality. That's what NIST has always loved. We're getting that extra 0 on measurements, getting it tight, getting it accurate. And so how do you assess the quality of this information? We also knew we had to focus on the exchange of information. So we thought a lot about, well, how do you move data around? How do you know it's right? Things like that. And we knew if we really built this system up, we could get new methods, new metrologies to do materials discovery design. And that would lead to data-driven approaches to the development of these new materials. Now, we wrote this down in 2013. I'll give myself a little pat on the back for that because AI really is all about that. And if you'd asked me back in 2013 when that was going to happen, I would have gotten it wrong. I would have told you it was going to be 10 years, 20 years. I'm not exactly sure, but we're going to get there. Now we're up to our eyes in it. That's why I was late. I was at an AI for materials meeting. So it's exploding. Yeah. Right. So if you want, you can get a study that just came out 2 days ago. And this is the first place I've ever presented this particular slide. And you can download, this is actually published by a sister society to ACERS, the TMS. And it's free to download. So I would recommend it. 5 minutes to go. Holy moly, I'm having too much fun. Okay. So, problem is I don't have my laptop so I can jump over things, so you're gonna watch a movie basically at this point. But I wanna finish on time. So, AI and the MGI, I wanna show you just one thing here that I think is really cool. So this was designing an alloy, okay, 3 components. And so the idea here is you're putting this in a beamline, okay? And you're gonna raster across this thing, and you're actually going to figure out the phase diagram. And so I can't go into all the details here, but all I'm going to say is that you can put these things in the beamline now and pick out the entire phase diagram of this 3-component system, okay, very quickly. But it's even more powerful than that because you can start to use statistical methods, Bayesian statistical methods, and figure out how to maximize your information gathering so you don't even have to sample the whole system. You just poke around and say, well, where's the greatest uncertainty in this picture? And if I say, I'll go measure there next. Okay, well, where else am I confused? I'll go measure there next. Okay, so the second that you start to realize that what you do is measure there next, if you had a synthesis system, then you could also make there next. Okay, and so then you're suddenly talking about autonomous or self-driving experimentation. Okay, so the fusion of AI, robots, for doing synthesis is going to change science, okay? Because you're going to now be closed loop, right? Where you put an AI into the system with robots, and you can suddenly figure out what the next experiment is, tell the computer, explore this space, and it will just do it, okay? So it's exciting times. All right, so as I said, I was going to talk about the strategy in the last couple of minutes here. We have released a new strategic plan, which you can also download or find on www.mgi.gov, which you can't read there because it's blue. And I do want to show a couple of other slides because it's really weird serendipity with the last talk. So you'll forgive me. So I'm going to go quickly over this about how we get more data and talk about how you build a data infrastructure. And just mention the fact that we've had a lot of success in building infrastructure for data. There's some real issues around incentives, okay? And in that space, I would say there are 3 big issues. Lack of information. If you don't know about the infrastructure, you can't do anything. That's trivial. Technical is where there's some connections here. So here's an example of people who are really good at sharing data, the astronomy community. And we're in fact modeling our stuff. This is the virtual observatory's access to the Hubble data, actually. And for what it's worth, because you were mentioning the fact that they're very good at publicizing their images, they get a 3-to-1 on the research. That means 2/3 of the papers published on Hubble data were not taken by the PIs that took the data. Right? So you're suddenly seeing an enormous leap. And of course, the astronomers like to joke when this stuff got started, that this guy was having fun with them, so forgive me to the astronomers, right? So, well, why is it so easy for the astronomers to share data and not us? And the answer was, well, the data is worthless, right? Right, and so the materials, there's much more challenges with IP. Whereas, here, it's publicly funded research. So the professional problem is the big one, okay? So here's Galileo looking at Jupiter, not Jupiter, but Saturn. And what he did first, he actually thought he was looking at moons. And so he published. You know how he published? He published a 37-letter anagram You know why he did that? So he wouldn't tip off his competitors, right, that he had looked at this, but he could prove he did it by decoding the anagram if he needed to. And it is my position that every single scientific researcher would do this if they were allowed to. So, you know, the rules had to change. Okay, and they were. The funders of science basically said you can't do that, right, which were patrons at the time. And then, of course, you know, societies evolved around the new sets of best practices. And we have the publication system that we have today, for better and worse. But you wouldn't design that publication system that way if you were in charge. Okay, so I have to stop basically now. So I just want to say that what we really need to do is build an infrastructure, okay, that addresses the real problem. Okay, which is how do we create systems that allow us to do science and engineering? We have to create platforms to do it. We have to work together so that people can combine their data sets, build on prior work, visualize their results, discover interrelationships in the data, using AI, machine learning techniques, and find new patterns. And so that's a lot of what I want the MGI to focus on in the next decade. As I said, I don't have time, but this is basically how you get fame for scientists, where fame means 50 people, usually, that know who you are. And for businesses, they want to make money. Right? It's not complicated. And so to do this, we need to create a network. So with that, and since I'm out of time, I appreciate your attention. And as I said, please reach out to me if you have questions.